Okay, so now we're going to hear from Marnie McIntosh. Marnie McIntosh, she has got a business called Thyme for You, and she's up on the Bruce Peninsula. Come on up, Marnie.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me here tonight and for all the support that FoodLink has given us. My husband Bill and I started a new business this year after I retired, so that's what I'm going to talk about. Unfortunately, because of health concerns, he wasn't able to be with us tonight. We too are older folk, and it catches up with you. So I guess some background on it. I guess it was probably about 25 years ago. We first got interested in heirloom vegetables. We started with tomatoes because we were looking for tomatoes that really tasted good, as well as a variety of colors and things that we were seeing in magazines were coming up from the States. Over the years, we added more vegetables, different kinds of vegetables, mainly sticking again with the heirlooms. We were really exploring that. During that time, we also joined Seeds of Diversity, which is an organization for heirloom and open pollinated vegetables. Produce of all kinds, I guess. And we learned a lot through them about open pollinated and heirloom vegetables, about organic gardening, and about seed saving. So that really started our journey. In the back of my mind, I had the idea that someday I'd really like to just garden and share our products with people who really enjoyed and appreciated the quality. That wasn't possible where we were. First of all, I was working full-time, as was my husband, and we were raising a family. And the land we lived on was very small lot and very dark. So we did what we could. We got very creative with containers, and we managed to grow quite a lot of things. But the idea always was that when and if I could retire, this would be my business. So about 7 years ago, we decided to start looking for a piece of property that would be big enough to allow us to do a garden, a marketable garden. And we finally ended up in the area just outside of Wyerton. We were very happy to have found a 4.5-acre property there. So 4 years ago, we started building our home and starting to put in gardens, and I got rocks. All of I got rocks. Yeah, it was quite an eye-opener. The land looked really, really good when we bought the place. And that first few years, we tried to garden. And we found every rock that you missed. And we finally gave up and said, that's it. If we're ever going to make this a reality, we have to garden up. We can't garden down. So we started building containers. Over the years, the last one was added this spring, which now allows us a full 3-year rotation on our crops. And this was my retirement year. So I'm now officially retired. The whole idea started to come together again, finally, this spring, knowing that I was going to have the time. The first thing I did was put together a list of all of the products that I had been growing. And then I started doing some cold calls through email to local chefs, thinking they're the market that I can readily tap into, seeing as how it's middle of February and nobody else knows what we're doing, and we were fairly new to the area and so forth. And it was partly to let them know that we were coming, that we were going to be doing this, but it was also to gauge the interest level, because if the interest level wasn't there, there wasn't much point in putting all of the time and effort into it. And we were very gratified to find that the interest was there, and they were very anxious for us to contact them once we actually had something to share. So we decided, fine, we have to focus on something as the first year. We focused on the tomatoes, which was where we had started our passion. We still grew all the other vegetables, but not in marketable quantities. They were just for our use. And I started coming up with all kinds of questions, like, how do I do this? I've never done this in my life before. I've worked in offices and in literacy all my life. The only gardening and farming I had was the little bit I'd gotten in our own front yard in containers. So I called FoodLink Grey Bruce, and they were extraordinarily helpful. They met with me one day in the early spring and were able to provide answers for a lot of my questions. Those they couldn't answer, they were able to provide me with links as to where I would go to find those answers, and they introduced me to the concept of the producer support program, which we're very thankful for. Once the garden was up and running, and the grant that we asked for, the business plan we wrote up was to increase the infrastructure, of which there was virtually none, and it was specifically for a greenhouse, and also to provide us with the tools to sell at market gardens and that sort of thing. We weren't sure at that point just which way this was going to take us. And we were very thankful for that. I can't say enough about the amount of help they gave us, especially as new businesses, and we had no money and nothing to back us up, so their expertise was absolutely critical. The gardens were planted. When I finally had some produce to work with, I followed up on the initial emails that I'd sent out and called them all and said, fine, would you like a basket of samples? And they were very open to that idea. So we started putting together baskets, boxes of different kinds of produce that we were growing and taking them to the different chefs to get their input. They were very happy. It did lead to some orders, which was wonderful. But more than that, it allowed us to establish some credibility, a chance to prove that we could do what we were saying we could do, that the products were as good as we were telling people they were, or that we believed that they were. And it also opened up that whole door to us of the chef market. For the first year, we were quite pleased with the way it went. As all of you know, it was not the best year for gardening. And without the infrastructure of a greenhouse, we didn't have a way to shelter the gardens when all of those rains came in early August. I was coping quite nicely with the watering. It was the extra water that kind of got to us. But that's all right. The other thing we did at the end of the summer is we were able to contact the chefs again and start querying them about what they would be interested in for the coming year and what quantities they'd be interested in receiving, because that's the other thing. There is just Bill and I, and he's 73, so there's a limit to what we can do. I must say that Chef Anthony Bevan from Georgian College was absolutely wonderful. We did speak to a number of chefs, so it wasn't he only that gave us input, but he was fabulous. He actually took us aside, gave us time in his office, gave us email time to talk about the things we really didn't know. We cook, but we're not restaurateurs and we're not chefs. What were they looking for? What size of vegetables? What types of vegetables? How do they arrange their plates? What makes a vegetable sexy? That's what we were told they wanted. They wanted different, unique, and sexy vegetables, which left me in a bit of a quandary. So he was absolutely wonderful. Since then, we've been able to put together a research list of different products that we worked back and forth with the chefs on, and we now have a shorter list of potentials to trial this summer, which we're very excited about. The greenhouse that we were talking about is now going to be up very shortly. We too were a little delayed this summer, and that's where my seedlings are going to be grown next summer. And as one of the other support grantees mentioned, the shoulder season for vegetables, that's where I'll be able to put in some early crops to be able to get produce to the chefs before the season officially starts, and also to extend the season at the end. We're very happy with the way it's gone for this first year, which is wonderful. The greenhouse we're putting up is slightly smaller, I believe, than maybe some of the ones you saw pictures of today. It's 12 by 20, which for us is a valid size. We did a lot of research into what we could do, and that's the size we came up with. It's going to be the PVC pipe hoops, and we've got commercial poly to put on it. It just arrived in the mail this week, so we're all set to go. Ours is slightly different, that we're putting 2x6 insulated knee walls all around the outside to help keep the heat costs down. And we're building raised platforms for the seedlings, which will also allow us to establish small isolated areas with greater heat control for those seedlings in the spring. This spring, we had no water, and then we had all the water we could possibly have wanted. But during that drought period, it became very obvious that if we were going to continue to do this, we also needed to find a way to work more effectively with irrigation. So we've killed two birds with one stone, and Maria doesn't know about this yet, because I just found out somebody up the road had one of those 1,000-liter water tanks for sale, a used one, and we were able to get it for a really good price. My husband's at home paying for it tonight, on top of everything else he's doing. And that is going to go into the greenhouse in the spring to act as a heat sink to absorb the the heat from the sun, and that'll help to mellow out those temperature fluctuations, which should save us and the plants a lot of wear and tear. And then as soon as the weather outside is nice enough that the greenhouse will be opened up, it'll be transferred out to the farthest beds away from the house. And Bill's in the process of designing some dew and water collecting systems that will feed into it. So we'll have a closer watering system that doesn't require our well in order to irrigate those fields next year. So that's all I have to say. It's been a wonderful experience, and I thank Maria and Friedman at that point and Jennifer very much for all of their help and support. Without them, I'm not sure we could have done what we have done, and it's been quite a hoot. Thank you.
That's great, Marnie. It's really great to hear that you're having such positive feedback from the chefs. Yeah, and you can see those colorful heirloom varieties are just so beautiful, you know. Yeah, and the flavor, right. Oh, that's fantastic.